Hello everyone, welcome to Self-Knowledge. As every Sunday, we are having our self-knowledge course. Today we're having a lecture number 28 of this set of 50 lectures. And today we're having a very unusual and interesting topic. Because even though we have heard talking about Christ a lot in our lives, actually today we will talk about Christ in a different way than we are used to. In this lecture, we are going to delve into what the universal and individual Christ is. And we are going to learn that this is a force that we can develop in ourselves. So the objective of this lecture will be to, sorry, I'm checking if everything's okay here. The objective of this lecture will be to comprehend how we can incarnate our individual Christ so we can unite with the universal Christ. So I invite you to check this video, the whole video, to listen to all the explanation, and if you have any question regarding this topic, you can write it down there in the chat, and at the end of the explanation, if you have any question, I will be solving your questions. And even if you see, if you watch this video after this live session, well, you can write your question and I will be checking the message or the chat of the video, and I will be solving your questions. And to start talking about Christ, let's first talk about the historical Christ. What is Christ? Let's start there. Actually, it is important to open our mind to begin to understand this topic, because throughout time we have come to know Christ through dogmas and beliefs that have forcibly pigeonholed Christ into a single master. But in reality, Christ has been present in the different cultures of all times. So the first thing to understand is that Christ is a force of our consciousness that can be incarnated. And some masters have some people have become masters and have arrived to this point, to the point of incarnating the Christ force in themselves. Some of those people are or were, for example, in China, Christ was Fuji. For the Toltecs, it was Quetzalcoatl. In Japan, we had Amida. And for the Greeks, it was Heracles or Hercules for the Romans. And in fact, the 12 labors of Hercules, Hercules are related to the inner work, to the Christic work. And for the Egyptians, the Christ was Osiris. And for that reason, when a master, and at that time, achieved his crucifixion, it was said that he became Osirified. And as in the case of Hermes Trismegistus, that was another master who incarnated this force. Let me see another example so we can see, for example, the Buddha or Krishna, and those are just a few, but with this we can see that before Master Jesus, which is the one that let's say most popular, there had already been a Christ, and in other cultures and eras. And after Master Jesus, there have also been Christ like Mohammed, like Dante Alighieri, like Saint Germain, like Cagliostro, like Samael, like Rabelais, like Joan of Arc, and Saint Teresa of Avila, since not only men can achieve justifications, women also have the same opportunity. It's the same for both. And they were just people who managed to incarnate their own internal Christ. Now, what makes Master Jesus special? Well, it is that he fulfilled a mission that must be fulfilled in each race, and that only the highest hierarchy beings can fulfill, and he is actually one of them. And that mission is that in a physical form, with their own lives, they have to come and represent that cosmic drama of crucifixion, to show what every initiate must live in his inner world to achieve his own crucifixion. They do this work to live this message engraved in the collective memory. In the previous race, that was the Atlantean race, was a great master named Manu Vaivaswata, who fulfilled this mission. And in this one, this one is the area race. Master Jesus, that is known as Jesus Christ, was the one that was elected to fulfill this mission, to show with his own life this cosmic drama, the drama of the crucifixion that all initiates needs to live in their own inner world, in their path to reach their own crucifixion. Now, since we saw the role of the historical Christ, let's see what exactly is the universal Christ and what is the individual Christ, so to understand what is that force that Jesus and all these masters incarnated, and that we too, if we do the interior work that is required, can incarnate. Let's first talk about the universal Christ. When talking about the universal Christ, we must talk about fire, as trying to discover the nature and the essence of fire is actually trying to discover God, whose real presence has always been revealed under the fiery appearance. Christ is fire. He is that fire that can create, that can destroy, and that constantly renew nature. We find many relationships between divinity and fire in different cultures, where different cultures were rendered cults to fire. And in this Occidental culture, we see how God was also related to fire in multiple times. Like, for example, in the burning bush that we saw in Exodus, and the burning of Sinai following the granting of the Decalogue, also in Exodus. And those are two of the manifestations through which God appeared to Moses. And also under the figure of a flame, a colored jasper and sardonic being seated on an incandescent and dazzling throne. And that was how St. John described the owner of the universe in the Apocalypse. And for example, St. Paul writes that our God is devouring fire, and in his epistles to the Hebrews. And on the other hand, Jesus said in Luke 12 that he had come to cast fire on the earth. And Paul said in his letter to the Thessalonians that Christ would reveal himself with his powerful angels in a flame of fire. Thus, we see how that universal fire, that is the Creator, is that living and philosophical fire that makes chaotic matter fatal, that can create and that can destroy according to its laws. This universal fire is known as the army of voice. It is also known as the army of the word, which are God's enlightened masters who give light to the universe, who have achieved or who have developed themselves their individual Christ. The sacred absolute Son, from where we all came, is what is known as the unmanifested God. And this unmanifested God actually unfolds in the manifested God to create matter. So we see that to create, God needs to unfold himself into God the Father and God the Mother, the positive and the energy and the negative force. Sorry, the masculine and the feminine. That is the reason why we see how the angels or the Elohims are represented as beings who have both sex in them. Because to create, God needs to unfold into masculine and feminine, and from that sexual union, since all creation is sexual, and hence the sacredness of sexuality, a third force is born, which is fire, which is the Christ. And that force of the Christ, which is the fire, is the one that has the power to create, to renew, or to destroy. This power creates the atoms, creates the planets, creates the galaxies, creates the universes, and also creates all the human beings, all those sparks that come down to manifestation to take a physical body, to learn, and that all came with the mission of awaken their consciousness to return to the absolute Son as individual Christ, to become part of the universal Christ, or to the army of the Word. So that universal Christ is actually the union of all the Christs, of all those awakened and self-realized beings of the galaxy who have achieved their own Christifications. These beings that make up the universal Christ are conscious beings who decide to be part of the creation, who by, as I said, unfolding and uniting sexually, create that third force, that is the fire, and they manifest this fire through the verb to create. That is the reason why we see the angels represented with trumpets or with swords. With trumpets, they represent, or these trumpets represent the powers of manifesting fire through the verb to create using mantras. And it is said that the mantra Om, for example, resounds in the universe. And that is because with this mantra, by these very powerful beings, this universe was created. And when these angels are represented with swords, this represents the manifestation of the fire, but in its destructive form, when they need to destruct something, a planet, a galaxy, whatever. Thus, we see how the Christ is actually the verb, is actually the word, the logos, known as the great word. And we see how St. John defines Christ by saying that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. So we see that this is how the Word created man, and everything that we actually can observe and the things that we cannot observe. We have heard about the God's creation, the theory, and we have heard about the Big Bang theory. But what cannot be seen is how actually both theories speak of exactly the same thing, about how self-realized beings that inhabit the seventh dimension when unfolding and uniting and creating, the creation unfolds from dimension to dimension until it reaches this third dimension. And in this, that great explosion that gives rise that gives rise to the matter occurs. So Big Bang was not an accident, but a work of Christic creation. That is what is said, that by the word everything was made. Actually, it is the same thing. And the Christ force is actually contained in everything created. It is in the germ, in the seed that generates a new life, and in the human being, it is contained in our germ, in our seed, in our sexual gonads. And that is why with our sexuality, we can create another living being, exactly like us. But using our sexual energy wisely through the suprasexuality, we can actually create ourselves internally, create these internal bodies that can allow us to have presence in those higher dimensions of the nature. But there is something that we need to make clear, and is what all those beings who want to belong to the army of the boys, what is that they need to do? What is the process? And as I mentioned, Master Jesus had the great task of representing the cosmic drama with his life to show this path. And that is why he said that he was the path, because he came to show us with his life what is the path that the initiate must go through to ascend, to develop the intimate Christ. So, represented in Master Jesus' life is everything that the initiate will need to live within himself. Actually, and although Christ is born 1,000 times in Bethlehem, it is of no use if he has not born in our heart as well. And it doesn't matter if he had died and risen on the third day from the dead. Actually, that is of no use if he doesn't die and rise in us too. And that is actually talking about our internal Christ. For example, what we know as Christmas, which is something that, for example, Master Jesus represented in life, actually inside us is going to represent that moment of the birth of our internal Christ. So Jesus not only incarnated his own Christ, but also he represented this to show us with his life the path that we need to live, which is something actually very valuable. And all those trials, all the suffering, the pain, the crucifixion, the death, and the resurrection are part of the internal path towards Christification. And it is a hard path, and as it is so hard, that is the reason why it is easier just to praise the Master who achieves this I don't know how to name it, who achieves this than to do what he did. It is easier just to praise him. And on the cross of the martyr of the Calvary, we find the letters INRI. That, exoterically means Jesus Nazarenus Rex Judario Bienme, something like that in Latin. And in English, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. But as every part of Jesus' life was actually intended to giving an esoterical teaching, esoterical, that is like hidden, actually the mystery of Christ is defined with those 4 letters, as it esoterically means ignis natura renovatur integra, that in Latin. And in English, it means fire, or the fire incessantly renews nature. But this is a hidden meaning, as also is hidden the sexuality of Jesus, the fact that he made his work to crucifixion with his couple, that was Mary Magdalene, and people think that he was celibate, but was not like that. It was just hidden, that secret part, because actually that is the secret that can lead us to be like him. We need to know that Christ is that fire that incessantly renews nature. And as I said, in us, the Christic force is that fire that is contained in our sexual energy. That is why when we fornicate, when we spill our sexual energy just for fun, just for pleasure, we are actually spilling the Christic energy, and we are actually betraying our inner Christ. We need to be aware of that. And the universal Christ is the union of all the individual Christ. And I mean, we need to have this clear. You have, or you can see that there are also debates between the monotheism and the polytheism, who claims that there is only one God, there are multiple gods, etc. But actually, if you see the Bible in Psalms 82 says that God is in the meeting of gods. That is why, or the reason of this is that God, or Christ, is a perfect multiple unit. So what is called as God, which is the universal Christ, is actually this, the union of all the individual Christ of a galaxy. So now that we have see what the universal Christ is, let's see what is the individual Christ and how we can develop this force. It is said that temptation is fire, and triumph over temptation is light. This let us see that our fire, our inner fire, is currently trapped, is currently conditioned by all our temptations, that is, by all the desires of our ego. And that when we manage to triumph over each of our temptations, we rescue the light. The light is the wisdom, the light is the power. And as Christ is fire, in order to get to incarnate the force of the Christ in ourselves, we must first release that force that, as I said, is trapped and conditioned on inside each one of our desires. That Christic fire, which is our essence, which represents the spirit, the light, is contained in our seminal envelope. It is that 97% of consciousness that is trapped by the ego. And the ego expresses itself daily through our desires. It is that spirit for doing or not doing. And as this spirit in us is currently conditioned by our ego, we always have spirit, we always have courage for things of the ego. We have a lot of spirit for laziness, to watch TV, to be on the cell phone, to gossip, to fight, to fornicate, to get out and drinking, in short, even to suffer, we have courage. And on the other hand, we have no courage at all for the things of the consciousness, for the things of the being, for the things that can lead us to awaken our consciousness. And to release that fire, that spirit, that Christ in us, we must start denying our desires. We must start denying ourselves. You see that Master Jesus referred to this when he told his disciples that if anyone wanted to seek him, that is to seek the Christ within within himself, he should deny himself. And we deny ourselves when we deny the egoic desires that we feel at every moment. We must know that if we don't refuse our desires, we will forever be slaves of desire, and we will always continue repeating the same mistakes. On the other hand, if we start denying our desires, if we don't give in into temptation, we are going to rescue light, we are going to rescue wisdom, and we are going to rescue the courage, the spirit, and then we will begin to have spirit, but now for the things of the consciousness. Now we are going to have spirit to do this internal work, to meditate, to eliminate our negative ways of being, practicing the psychological death. We are going to have spirit to transmute our sexual energy, practicing the suprasexuality, and we are going to have spirit for teaching others this knowledge, as the individual Christ is actually developed with the three factors of the revolution of consciousness that we saw in detail in lecture number 17. That is here in the video section in case you didn't see that lecture. And how do we deny desire? Well, actually, practicing the first factor, which is to die, the psychological death, to practice self-observation at every moment, be in a self-observation state to discover all our negative ways of being, all these temptations that our own ego is giving us at every time. So we give in and we let our ego to manifest, so it gets stronger, so it feeds on our energy, and we commit mistakes. And after or when we are in self-observation and we discover one detail of our ego, anger, laziness, envy, pride, lust, greed, so on, lying, betrayal, whatever. When we discover a negative way of being that wants to manifest, we need to judge it, so we comprehend that it's actually a defect. And once we know it is psychological defect, it is actually that negative way of being in me that have trapped part of my consciousness. What we need to do, we need to ask our Divine Mother, that internal part of our consciousness, to eliminate that negative way of being. That way, when we get to comprehend that and we get to eliminate it, we release the fire, we release the essence, and thus we rescue the light, and we recover the spirit. Then, through the second factor, which is to be born, we are going to take that recovered fire and we are going to fuse it in our spinal cord, and we are going to make it ascend through our spine through the practice of suprasex in order to create our internal bodies with this fire. So, because we need to create inside of us the vehicles, so this force, this powerful force that is to Christ, can actually incarnate in us. We need first to regenerate this physical body, we need to regenerate our vital bodies, and we need to create a natural, mental, and causal bodies inside ourselves. And we know that all creations have a sexual origin. In this case, we are going to be, by doing this practice, we are going to be creating our own individual Christ. And through the third factor, which is the sacrifice for humanity, we will develop love for our inner work and love for all humanity by giving this knowledge of the three factors to everyone in its pure form, so that everyone has the tools to do this work as well, since one of the main functions of the Christ is to consciously sacrifice himself for humanity so that they may find the path. So if we are aiming to incarnate our individual Christ, we must sacrifice for humanity. And when is going to the Christ be born in us? As we saw in lecture number 10, where we talk about the 7 bodies, as we begin to work on these 3 factors, to die, to be born, to sacrifice, we are going by practicing this superior sexual practice, in which instead of expelling our sexual energy, we are going to make it ascend through our spine. By doing this work, we are going to be regenerating the bodies that we already have, the physical and the vital. We are going to create our solar, astral, mental, and causal bodies. And of these bodies, we actually only have like an embryo. We need to actually create a whole body. And when we have them created, we will be able of moving consciously and voluntarily in those higher dimensions. And we will do all this process in what is called the first mountain. In later lectures, we are going to explain all the process of the 3 mountains in detail. But when we create these bodies, we come to a point at the causal world where we must make the decision whether to follow the direct path or to take the nirvana's path. There we will face like the maximum trial, where the guardian of the causal world will make us choose between these 2 paths, the direct path and the nirvana's path, which is, let's say, the nirvana's is like staying up to that point with all the powers, with all the faculties, and all the consciousness that we have acquired to that point, and living in a state of complete happiness and abundance for hundreds or thousands of years, but having to return to fall to this dimension to live unconsciously again, and to try to make this whole work again. By taking this choice, by taking the nirvana's path, we are actually betraying Christ. But if, on the other hand, we decide to take the direct path that consists of more sacrifice and pain, but that is the only path that will take us to return to unite with our internal Father, to merge with that great force that is the universal Christ. But out of 1,000 people who get to that point, 999 always choose the nirvana. And that is the reason why Jesus said that out of 1,000 who follow me, only 1 is mine. That is the reason why. And at that point, when we have chosen the direct path, and after having created these internal bodies, then we will have created our human soul. We will be already a true man. Then we can unite with our divine soul, which is called Buddhi. And from that union, the union from the human and the divine, the so-called perfect marriage will be completed, or the perfect matrimony. And from that union, from that perfect matrimony, will result the birth of the Christ within us. We need to know that if we don't previously become men, which is to have those 5 internal bodies created, to have this complete constitution within ourselves, it's not possible for the son of the man to be born. And at that time, when we complete that process, what we know as Christmas will be given in our hearts. And as I was saying, Although Christ is born 1,000 times in Bethlehem, it is useless if it's not born in our heart as well. So it is useless not to have it incarnated. We actually do nothing by following the messenger, and not the message. Every time, and that is something that we need to know, we pour out our sexual energy, we are pouring out the Christic force in us. And by starting the path of self-knowledge, and this path of inner development through applying the 3 factors in our daily lives, we will undoubtedly be able to develop the Christ in us. And that is the most fantastic thing that we can achieve in our lives. And the advent of the Christic fire is actually the most important event of our own life. When the Christ is born and when it develops within us, that Christic force comes and takes over all our internal processes, our motor, our mental, our emotional, our instinctive, and our sexual processes. And all this is going to now be managed by that Christic consciousness. And among the works that the intimate Christ comes to do in us is first the elimination of the 7 cause eyes, or those are the main seeds of the ego. You know, the seed of the laziness, lust, greed, envy, gluttony, pride. What am I missing? Okay, I forgot. But he's going to clean us from all the ego, from even the seeds of the ego. And in Egypt, it was known as the 7 red demons. And if we study the Egyptian culture, we are going to find Osiris, and we are going to find the 7 red demons, which represented our own ego, and Osiris is the internal Christ that is going to fight with these seeds of the ego. And it is also, for example, in Roma, represented by Hercules and the 12 labors of Hercules. And we need to know that is our internal Christ, the savior of our own inner world. And actually, this has been the explanation that I have for you today. This has been today's lecture. I hope I made, or you understood this topic. And remember that the cosmic Christ is formed by all the individual Christs of a galaxy. And I wanted to make for you here a short list of some of the masters who have achieved this of incarnating their own internal Christ. So here you can find that in some of the disciples of the Master Jesus actually achieved this, and some other people are on the different eras. And I wanted just to invite you to our next lecture next Sunday. And in that lecture, we are going to be talking about the pendulum law, which is a very interesting lecture. And in this lecture, we are going to learn how this law works, the law of the pendulum, and how we can transcend it, and how we can use this pendulum law to get to find the truth about everything. So this has been all for today. Thank you for watching this video. See you next Sunday, and have a great rest of the day. Ciao, ciao.